Good evening, everyone. From the moment a doctor announces it's a boy or it's a girl, a quiet, lifelong process begins. We are placed into a category that will shape the clothes we wear, the toys we are given, the traits we are praised for, and even the careers we can imagine for ourselves. Gender is not just a label, it is one of the most fundamental lenses through which we see ourselves and the world. Tonight, we are going to explore gender as a core identity. We will move beyond the tired stereotypes and look at what modern psychology actually tells us about how gender shapes our self-concept, our behavior, and our lives. We'll discover that the story is far more complex and more hopeful than a simple binary. Part 1: The Gendered Self-Schema. Let's start with a basic but critical distinction. Sex refers to biological characteristics, chromosomes, hormones, anatomy. Gender, on the other hand, refers to the roles, preferences, and behaviors that a culture associates with being male or female. Gender is a social and psychological construction, and it becomes a central part of our self-schema. A self-schema is a cognitive framework that organizes how we process information about ourselves. When gender is a core part of that schema, we see the world through its lens. For decades, psychology treated masculinity and femininity as opposite ends of a single scale. You could be masculine or you could be feminine, but not both. This old one-dimensional view forced people into an impossible choice. Modern research has replaced it with a two-dimensional view. We now use separate scales, one for masculinity, one for femininity. This reveals 4 distinct patterns. Traditional sex-typed males score high in masculinity and low in femininity. Traditional sex-typed females score high in femininity and low in masculinity. But there are also androgynous individuals high on both scales and undifferentiated individuals low on both. This matters because it has cognitive consequences. Sex-typed individuals, those with a strong gender schema, tend to view the world primarily through a male-female lens. In a classic study, they were more likely to confuse members of the opposite sex as all alike, less accurate at distinguishing individuals. Androgynous individuals, by contrast, were more accurate. Let me show you this in action. Raj is a senior engineer at a tech firm. He prides himself on being logical, competitive, and decisive, traits he considers essential to being a real man. On personality tests, he scores very high on traditional masculinity and very low on femininity. His team includes 2 talented female software developers, Anika and Fatima. Despite working with them for over a year, Raj repeatedly mixes up their names and even their roles. In meetings, he attributes a comment Anika made to Fatima. He privately thinks, "They're both quiet and conscientious, basically the same kind of worker." With his male colleagues, however, he instantly distinguishes who is blunt versus diplomatic, who is a creative coder versus a careful tester. His confusion is not ill intent. It is a cognitive filtering effect. Because gender is a central schema for Raj, the category women at work overrides individual differences, lumping them together as interchangeable. The two-dimensional view reveals his pattern clearly: high masculinity, low femininity, a classic sex-typed male, and his perception is narrowed accordingly. Part 2: Gendered Occupations and the Self. Our occupation strongly defines our social self, and occupational stereotypes become part of how we see ourselves. Research consistently shows that male-dominated professions like engineering and law are rated high in dominance and low in affiliation, qualities like warmth and nurturing. Female-dominated professions like nursing and teaching are rated high in affiliation and low in dominance. And crucially, students training for these occupations have self-images that match those stereotypes. Law students see themselves as high in dominance. Student nurses see themselves as high in affiliation. One exception is medicine, which has a profile closer to the female professions, high in affiliation, which may help explain the rising number of women entering that field. The consequence is clear. People are attracted to occupations that fit their self-image, and this drives persistent gender segregation in the workforce. Consider Priya. She had always been described as gentle, patient, and emotionally perceptive. Friends confided in her because she listened without judgment. When deciding on a career, she briefly considered pharmacy. Her parents liked its respectability, but shadowing a pharmacist left her cold. "I'd be counting pills behind a counter all day. I want to hold someone's hand when they're scared." She enrolled in nursing instead, and from her first clinical placement, she felt she had come home. Her classmates were overwhelmingly women, and when they completed a self-image questionnaire, the group profile was high in affiliation and low in dominance. Priya's own scores fit the same pattern. When her brother, a software engineer, joked that nursing was just being nice for a living, Priya replied, "I wouldn't last a day in your job and you'd last about 5 minutes in mine. We're exactly where we're supposed to be." This is self-image congruence. Priya didn't just choose a career, she chose an identity that felt authentic to her gendered sense of self. Part 3: Agency and Communion. Psychologists capture the core of these gendered traits with two powerful concepts. Masculinity, in psychological terms, is often described as instrumentality or agency, a concern with achieving goals, being active, and acting on the world. Femininity is described as expressiveness or communion, a focus on relationships, caring for others, and interpersonal connections. Neither is better than the other. But an unmitigated focus on one, agency without communion, or communion without agency, can be deeply destructive. A satisfying life requires a balance of both. And this is where androgyny reveals its strength. Psychologically, androgynous individuals are more adaptable, better liked, and more satisfied in relationships. They can be assertive or caring as the situation demands without it threatening their gender identity. Let me bring these abstractions to life with 3 very different people. First, Arjun, the unmitigated agent. He built a software company from nothing, driven by ambition, independence, and a relentless focus on goals. At work, his decisiveness and toughness served him brilliantly. At home, it was a different story. He treated family disagreements like boardroom negotiations, coldly logical, dismissive of emotion. When his teenage daughter cried over a broken friendship, he offered a bullet point plan instead of a hug. When his wife asked for more quality time, he scheduled a 15-minute weekly check-in and considered the problem solved. Over the years, his relationships withered. His daughter stopped confiding in him. His wife eventually asked for a separation. Sitting alone in his apartment, his therapist asked, "You won every deal, but who is left to celebrate with?" Arjun had pursued agency so single-mindedly that he had starved every communal bond. His life was a testament to the emptiness of unmitigated agency. Second, Maya, the unmitigated communal. She was the heart of her extended family. She remembered every birthday, nursed aging parents, mediated sibling disputes, and volunteered at her children's school. Everyone described her as selfless and warm. But Maya had no boundaries. She never said no, never asked for help, and felt guilty taking an hour for herself. Exhaustion turned to resentment, and eventually to severe burnout and early signs of an autoimmune condition linked to chronic stress. Her doctor asked, "You care for everyone else. Who cares for you?" Maya had abandoned her own goals and health in the service of communion. She had erased herself. And third, Jordan, the androgynous parent. Jordan is a project manager and the primary caregiver on weekends. At a morning meeting, he confidently presents a high-stakes budget and pushes back on unrealistic demands. By afternoon, he is sitting on the floor with his 4-year-old, patiently guiding her through a meltdown with gentle words and a warm presence. When his son needs discipline, he sets clear limits without losing tenderness. When his wife is exhausted, he listens empathetically and later suggests practical solutions. He doesn't worry whether any of this makes him manly. He simply draws on whatever the moment requires: assertiveness, nurturing, problem-solving, or emotional attunement. His marriage is strong, his children trust him, and his colleagues both respect and like him. Jordan embodies the flexibility of androgyny, and his life shows why a full human being needs the capacity to both act on the world and connect with it. Part 4: Interdependence and Independence in the Self. Gender also shapes the very structure of our self-concept. Research consistently finds that women tend to have a more interdependent self-concept, focused on close relationships, while men tend to have a more independent self-concept, focused on individual traits and autonomy. But there is nuance. Both men and women seek both connection and autonomy, just in different ways. Women often focus on intimate dyadic bonds. Men often focus on larger groups and collectives. Imagine Sophia and Tom, a married couple offered an extraordinary career opportunity requiring a cross-country move. Sophia lies awake that first night, mentally scrolling through the faces of her parents, her sister, her best friends, and her toddler's beloved daycare teacher. She thinks, "How will my mother cope without me nearby? My sister and I talk every day. Will that survive the time difference? My daughter is so attached to her grandparents." Her decision-making orbits around the preservation of close, emotionally dense relationships. Tom spends his night researching the new city's tech scene, the company's leadership reputation, and local professional networks. He thinks about career acceleration and joining a cycling community. He loves his family deeply, but his self-concept is not primarily structured around intimate ties. He sees himself as an autonomous agent navigating a broader social landscape. Both value connection and achievement, but Sophia's interdependence expresses through intimate bonds, while Tom's independence expresses through individual advancement and larger group affiliations. Part 5: Stereotypes and Perceived Competence. Gender stereotypes don't just shape who we think we are, they shape how competent we believe we are. Stereotypes associate certain abilities like maths and science with being male. And this has measurable consequences. Studies show that women can perform equally well on science reasoning tests but rate their own ability more negatively than men and are less likely to volunteer for science competitions. These perceived difficulties are largely a consequence of learned gender role stereotypes, not innate differences. Priya is a software engineer with 5 years of experience and a track record of successful product launches. During a design review, she and a male colleague, David, both present solutions to a system architecture problem. Priya's proposal is technically superior. Yet when she presents, she prefaces her slides with, "I'm not entirely sure this will work, but here's a rough idea." She speaks tentatively and concedes ground at the first questioning. David presents his less refined proposal with unwavering confidence. "Here's the solution we need to implement." After the meeting, Priya rates her own contribution as adequate but not impressive. David rates his as highly impactful. When a junior female engineer asks how she developed such expertise, Priya deflects, "I just got lucky with the projects I was assigned. There are 1,000 people smarter than me." Her self-rating bears no resemblance to her actual performance. She has internalized the stereotype that technical brilliance is male, and her self-doubt reinforces the very bias that constrains her. Part 6: Gender and Self-Esteem. Given all this, you might assume women suffer from much lower self-esteem than men. But recent evidence reveals only a modest difference. Why? Because disadvantaged groups develop protective strategies. They can attribute failure to prejudice against their group rather than to personal inadequacy. They can make social comparisons within their own group rather than with the advantaged group. And they can value success more in areas where their own group excels. Amira is a senior financial analyst at a large investment bank, a field dominated by men. She has been nominated twice for a promotion to director. Both times, the role went to a male colleague with a thinner track record. After the second rejection, she does not spiral into self-doubt. She tells her mentor, I know my numbers are stronger. The problem isn't my performance. It's that the evaluation committee still pictures a man when they think of a director. She attributes the failure partly to gender bias. This does not erase her frustration, but it protects the core of her professional self-concept. She continues to see herself as competent and begins exploring a move to a firm with a stronger record of promoting women. By attributing failure to prejudice, comparing herself to other women in similar roles, and valuing the skills she excels at, Amira preserves her self-esteem. Gender differences in self-esteem remain modest precisely because members of disadvantaged groups use these psychological shields. What we take with us. So, where does this leave us? Let me offer 4 reflections. First, gender is a schema, not a destiny. Raj shows us that seeing the world through a rigid male-female lens flattens our perception of others. The more we cling to a one-dimensional view of gender, the less accurately we see the people around us. Second, our careers are not just choices, they are identity projects. Priya the nurse chose a profession that matched her self-concept, just as countless others do. This is not wrong, but it explains why workforce segregation persists even without overt discrimination. We are drawn to roles that feel like us. Third, androgyny is not about being genderless, it is about being whole. Jordan's life demonstrates that the capacity to be both assertive and nurturing, both goal-oriented and relationally attuned, is a profound strength. Unmitigated agency, like Arjun's, leads to isolation. Unmitigated communion, like Maya's, leads to self-erasure. Balance is not a luxury, it is a psychological necessity. Finally, the stories we tell about our competence matter. Priya the engineer was as skilled as her male colleague, but the stereotypes she had absorbed made her doubt herself. When we understand that these doubts are learned, not innate, we can begin to unlearn them. And when women like Amira refuse to internalize failure, when they attribute bias accurately and protect their self-worth, they show us that self-esteem is not a passive reflection of the world's treatment, it is something we actively defend. Gender is a core identity, yes, but it is not a cage. The more we understand its architecture, the more we can build a self that is spacious enough to hold all of who we are. Thank you.